So welcome, Nilofer. This is the mic. It's lively. It's normal. I switch in English. I hope you understand English, that there is no problem. So
Yeah,
here on stage...
You don't want to hear my French.
I know.
But pas du tout.
I know you know how to speak French because now, you know, Nilofer, she has a son in a school in Paris. She chose Paris. She loves Paris.
So this is a funny story. My son's in the audience. Because this
He's
is
here?
Yes.
Ah, hello.
And
He's afraid.
He's afraid, and he's really worried I'm going to make him translate. That I would give the talk, and he would have to translate in French. Or that you would talk to me in French, and he would have to translate. So he's going to make no eye contact whatsoever.
No eye contact. Okay, so just to give you a brief introduction, who is my guest? So Nilofer, she has personally launched more than 100 products, netting $18 billion in sales. Nilofer mentions knows what it means to lead teams, to invent the next big things. So, from working with Steve Jobs at Apple to defeating Microsoft in an epic industry battle, to advising C-suites for General Electric, IBM, and Logitech, she's got a world-class pedigree in knowing how to build a market advantage. So this is Nilofer Merchant. So we are very happy to have her on stage today. And I have a few questions for you.
I'm ready.
You're ready.
Je suis prête.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the woman evolution. Okay. I was wondering, actually, because you've been working for more than 20 years in Silicon Valley witnessing the change and the different style of startups. And I was wondering if there is a difference between like the Facebook style and the IBM style towards women. Is there any evolution, change?
Yeah, there has been a real big evolution. The positive part is that there was a time when women wore shoulder pads and acted much more like men in order to succeed. And I remember there was a time I was talking to some Google execs, and they were saying, you know, this is a generation where we don't have to act like men anymore. And there's a softening, there's a femininity back. And so for that, we should be grateful. But in some ways, things have not changed at all. I used to think, so I started my career in tech as an administrative assistant, and I grew up to be a CEO, and I've been on corporate boards, and just a very high progression. And what I used to think is, if you cracked the glass ceiling, does that term translate? Okay, so if you crack that ceiling, then you've succeeded. But actually what it means is one person has succeeded, not that the situation has changed. And so I find the inherent bias and sexism in the industry actually worse than it used to be when I was young. Maybe because I'm more aware, but certainly the statistics show there are not more women in leadership, there are not more women in the industry. All those statistics stay the same, which is disheartening at times.
How did you manage to actually go from admin to CEO?
How did I manage? I think the one thing is I've always raised my hand. You know, the say yes, and I remember one job opportunity came to me where an executive stopped me in the hallway. This was back when I worked at Apple Computer. And he asked me, he had this spreadsheet, and he was like, can you help me solve this problem? And I had no idea what he was actually talking about. But I said, absolument, and I just like ran away and said I would go solve it. And I actually was able to come back with some answers, but only because I worked at it and because I said yes. And I look back at all these moments of careers. It turns out that guy had been trying to get someone to solve that problem for several months, and everyone kept saying no. They thought it was unsolvable. And it led me to lead a division that grew the business from 2 million to 180 million. And it was because everyone else said no thanks, or because they didn't think that problem was solvable. And sometimes you can take the really tough thing, and if you can chase that down, you end up having the win that no one else thinks is possible.
Okay, all right. Wow. And so you've been, I talked about Apple, IBM, etc. So you working with these people, advising them, helping them to grow their business. Have you seen a kind of winning pattern? like the leadership pattern. And can you describe it? Because my question behind this is this as this pattern feminine in a way, you know, or are they? That's my idea in the back, but.
That's a good question. So one of the things I've noticed is that curiosity can be a way of life. Passion can be a way of life. And you cannot have an innovation advantage, a market advantage, if you also don't have a passion advantage. So every leader I've ever seen succeed chases things with this exuberance. And it's not just because they're so big and charismatic, but it's because they're curious and they're willing, you know, curiosity is such a funny thing because it's also you're willing to say you don't know. And I moved to France, for example, I just been thinking about this whole curiosity thing and how much I talk about it as a very positive thing, but inherent in curiosity is the ability to not know something, which when you don't know something, you feel incredibly stupid. A friend who happens to be French, I saw her right before I went to California for vacances, and I just came back. So she was my very last person I saw before I came back to Paris. And she says, "What have you enjoyed about being in California?" And I said, "Oh, I had 2 whole weeks of being smart again, because not knowing the language and not understanding the culture as well means I'm learning. And learning is both really good and yet super hard, right? So that curious person is the person who puts themselves in situations where they have no idea, and then they're willing to be stupid for as long as it takes for them to ultimately not be stupid." And I think if anyone's actually going to succeed is you have to be willing to step into that unknowing.
Totally. And in curiosity, you have humility also.
Yeah.
Because being curious means that you are always amazed about the things.
Yeah.
So it means that you don't take the thing into like as if they are.
You don't take it for granted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the thing.
Yeah.
You don't take it for granted. Meaning that you have this childish look on things.
Right. There's a phrase about foolishness.
Yeah.
That sometimes the person who's foolish enough to believe something is possible is the one who actually makes it happen. And so foolishness has this duality of it. Sometimes you are willing to be foolish in order to go chase that thing.
Exactly, and you have to be ignorant also to dare do the things. Yeah. Because if you know exactly what it takes to do the thing, you don't do it. So being ignorant in a way can help being better. And I think that in a way, if you raise your hand, you didn't know how to help, but you wanted to help. You had this kind of ignorance. So, well, it's a pity. Silicon Valley is really made of white male. The boards of all the startups are only made of white males. I've even been like shocked when I was in Menlo Park, going at the Starbucks coffee. You have this kind of Tupperware meeting. You have women all together with the little kids, you know, in the rolling chairs, waiting for the man engineer, for the husband engineer, and they meet here at the Starbucks cafe. Like it's the only activity to do, and they don't work. And it's a lifestyle, you know, and it's super like, let's say, angoissant. Stressful, yeah, to thank you, to see that. So what do you think Silicon Valley needs to actually bring more women in tech? So
I have a take on this. So you know how the French government was once run by kings? Well, that same group, you could never say to them, boy, the divine right of kings really isn't a good idea. And I kind of feel the same way about Silicon Valley. Like, you're never going to get that group who's already in charge to want to give that up. And I actually think it's up to us to design a new structure, a new approach, and to find women investing in women, to figure out how to bring more women on your board when you're the startup CEO, right? To do the things that will build an entirely new power structure instead of knocking on the door of the old one. They're pretty committed to being who they are.
And who for you can stand this position, can do these kind of things in Silicon Valley today?
Oh, there's some great, like, for example, in the venture world, Eileen Lee, there's some venture people who are actually doing peer-to-peer development of women so they can actually invest in other women. One of the ones is Pipeline Fellowship. It's a woman named Natalia. She is both gay and a woman, and she is figuring out how to change the venture capital world by helping other women get strong enough financially to be able to invest. And so to me, it's a very progressive model.
Yeah. So maybe you didn't understand because it was in French, but at the beginning of this conference, I said, okay, we need to change our attitude. We need to help each other to really make this sisterhood thing happen. And I was talking about the fact that the digital era is actually maybe an open door for women. It's the moment, it's the time when authenticity, generosity, empathy are these things that we need and the things that will bring you to success. And you are talking about something, you have this concept of what you call onlyness.
Onlyness. I guess the French word might be unicité.
L'unicité.
Was that, did I say really badly? I just totally, you guys will understand what I just said, right? Okay, thanks.
Well, what is it?
So onlyness. Each of us is standing in a spot only you're standing in. It's a function of your history and experiences, visions and hopes. It's your difference that actually lets you have that novel idea, that fresh approach, that new take. So much of business in the past has been about fitting in, which means we leave all our difference at the door. If we're the only women in a company of men, for example, we're never going to bring out our own point of view because we're trying just to figure out how to fit into that environment. We're not celebrating that thing that only we can bring. But there's an opportunity in this new day with the startups, with the family, with different ways of being for each of us to bring all of ourselves, our creative self, our passionate self, our intellectual self, all these different things that we care about too, and bring them into work. And so onlyness is actually the fundamental unit of value creation in the modern time. I call that the social era. And it is so different because if you think about how we created value in the past, it was organizations or machines or capital. And now if we're moving to an ideas economy, then what matters is your different ideas. And that's what we're actually building value from, which means we have to draw on this thing that only you can bring. It's a beautiful opportunity for our femininity and for our empathy and for all the qualities that even men leave behind, the qualities they have. It's in the US they call it, so when black people try to pretend that they're not black, what's that word? They pass? I don't know if this same word applies here, but it's passing. So there's research that says women, men, people of color, gay people, everyone passes at different levels. There's some statistics I found around that. And even men pass at 60%, meaning they fake their interest in sports, or they do all these other things because it's expected of them, not because it's what they naturally care about.
Well, okay, so you get it, huh? Onlyness.
Onlyness.
So for the first time in history.
In history.
Now we don't need to adapt ourselves to organizations, but we need, on the contrary, to take our differences as our, how to say it?
To make an impact, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To make a dent in the world.
Okay. Nilofer, what's your definition of feminism?
What is my definition of feminism? Well, I guess the most obvious one is that each of us counts. Not everyone will make a difference in the world, but that anyone can make a difference in the world. I guess that's the most basic one. But underneath that is that idea that each of us has something. You know, when I was an admin way back early in my career, I remember sitting at corporate boardrooms and having no one pay any attention to me and having an idea that I thought might work. And I would say it. I would even be brave enough to say it, and everyone would ignore it. And later on, somebody else, almost always a man, would say it. And because that person had the pedigree and all that stuff, they got listened to. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. And so I want feminism to be the opportunity for every voice to count equally in a world so that we have an opportunity to fix old problems. If you kind of look around the world and you kind of think about all the things that we could improve, and so many people have ideas to make those improvements, why can't we each apply those ideas?
On a day-to-day basis, do you help other women, like a mentor, like helping them, especially because they are women?
Of course. In fact, that's how, I don't know how many of you know this, but I gave a talk on the TED stage, walk and talk. And 2 million some people have watched that talk, but the reason it started is because I was doing so many mentoring conversations and I was not taking good care of myself in the process, and I thought, why don't I just take people for a walk? And so if anybody wants to do a walk here in Paris, I'm definitely up for it, along the Seine, and it's a good opportunity just to hear other people's ideas too. And then I'm writing book 3 while I'm here, which is an opportunity to kind of mentor at scale. It's about how do you make your ideas powerful enough to dent the world.
Cool. So you choose Paris to write your book?
I chose Paris because we wanted that little one who's sitting in the middle here to have a global experience. And so we started, this is interesting, right? Feminism, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have brought my son. I mean, even, mind you, he's only 11, but you know what I mean? I wouldn't have brought him because it would have been like, oh, you wouldn't bring all of you. And so it's an opportunity to include all of you in your setting today.
Wow. All right. Thank you very much, Nilofer.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Big applause for Nilofer.